federal election campaign. So you can see the Shadow Treasurer Jim Chalmers up for this media conference. He's in the south of Brisbane in the area of Logan in a suburb called Barinba. And so Jim Chalmers speaking now, and Anthony Albanese, the Labor leader, who will speak soon. Let's take a listen in.
A better future for our local communities relies on better roads, safer roads, and a government which is on their side, and that's what this announcement is about today. And a better future is all about better paid, more secure work. And that's what we're here to talk about today, and I'll throw it over to Anthony for that purpose.
Well, thanks very much, Jim, and it's great to be in your electorate and just on the border of the electorate of Ford. I think Rowan Holtzberger is a fantastic candidate. I've known Rowan for a very long period of time, from when he was a young man in Broken Hill. And he's come to Queensland, like so many people, to make Queensland their home. He's raising his family here in this local electorate of Ford, and I think he will make an outstanding member if he's successful on the 21st of May. Today's been an opportunity to talk to workers who have done their bit to keep this country going during the last difficult 2 years. Workers who've turned up to work even when their families haven't been able to go to school or to conduct their normal activities. Companies like Toll and the freight and logistics sector have kept the economy going during these difficult times. And what they deserve is a government that pays them back, a government that doesn't attack their working conditions. But what we have from the Prime Minister now is an announcement that he's going to go back to the legislation that was defeated when it was introduced during the last term. Now, the only way that you want to get rid of the better off overall test is if you don't want people to be better off overall. It's pretty simple. And what the Prime Minister wants to do is to suspend that better off overall test. What that would do is mean that all of the extra conditions above people's basic wage, their leave loading, their holiday leave, all of those things are up for grabs, their penalty rates that they rely upon. Workers rely upon these additional payments to put food on the table for their families, to pay their rent, to pay their mortgages, to pay their school fees for their kids. And the fact that this government doesn't seem to get the message, even though we know that the cost of everything is going up except for people's wages, this Prime Minister's response is another attack on people's wages. What we know is that real wages decreased by 1.2% over the last year. But that's not good enough for this Prime Minister, in spite of the fact that the dampening down of wages has not only had a dire impact on people struggling to make ends meet, for families doing it tough out there, it's had a devastating impact on our national economy. The Reserve Bank of Australia say so. They're desperate to see wages increase, and yet for this government, they don't have a plan for anything except further cuts in wages. And can I make some comments as well about one of the greatest policy failures that we've seen from this government? This deal between China and the Solomons was foreshadowed last August. The government was warned, and yet only in recent days did the government bother to send a junior person across to the Solomons. No visit from the Foreign Minister, no visit from the Defence Minister, no engagement in a serious way with Prime Minister Sogavare. What we see is a foreign policy failure on our doorstep. The Solomon Islands is less than 2,000 kilometres from Cairns and Townsville. The distance between here and Perth is more than that. So what we see is a massive policy failure, because once again the characteristic of this government is on show. A Prime Minister who goes missing on the big questions. A Prime Minister who's always too little too late, whether it's the bushfires, whether it's ordering enough vaccines, whether it's ordering rapid antigen tests, whether it's responding to the floods, this Prime Minister is complacent. He's always there for the photo op, never there for the follow-up, never does the right planning to get ahead of issues. Now, President Biden is sending his lead Pacific negotiator, Kurt Campbell. That's how serious President Biden took this issue, and yet the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister on Insiders recently said it was all under control. Well, it doesn't look as though it's all under control. This is a very serious foreign policy failure. Australia needs to do more than step up with a slogan in the Pacific. It needs to step up with real engagement, deep engagement with our Pacific Island neighbours, because we know that the Solomons is strategic. We learnt that, if we needed a reminder, during the Second World War of how critical the Solomons was, and this is a massive policy failure. I'd ask Tony Burke's going to make some comments as well about IR.
Thanks, Anthony. The announcement from the government to bring back the Omnibus Bill is extraordinary. We have a situation where everything's been going up except for wages, and the government now says they want to bring back legislation which had wage cuts written all over it. 111 pages that bill was, and it had wage cuts in black and white. This is legislation that says your ordinary hourly rate, that can stay the same, but every penalty rate, every shift allowance, every loading, every overtime rate, up for grabs. Now, what does that mean in the real world? It means if you're someone working, say, in retail as a night manager, $10,000 a year can be up for grabs as a pay cut. If you're a butcher working on a Thursday to Sunday shift, $7,000 a year. If you're a part-time disability care worker, $14,000 a year. Now, you only say we're going to suspend the Better Off Overall test if you want to allow a situation for people to be worse off. Low wages haven't been an accident. The government made clear low wages are a deliberate design feature of their management of the economy. At a time when Australians are desperately wanting to see wages get moving again, the Prime Minister has made clear legislation that is about cutting wages is on the way back if Mr Morrison is returned.
Mr Albanese, if you are Prime Minister, what would you do on the Solomons? Would you be seeking to unravel this agreement? Would you be seeking to go to Beijing and meet with the leadership there? What would your approach be?
I would be engaging with the leadership of the Solomons, and I would have done it over a period of time. The problem is that those relationships aren't ones that can be done just during when there's a crisis. When Richard Marles was our person in the Pacific, he had deep engagement, indeed won a civil honour in the Solomons. What's clear is that we've dropped the ball here. What's clear is that when the warning was given in August, the government didn't act soon enough. August is now more than 6 months ago, 8 months ago. The government was warned about this.
Is there anything your government could do if you are elected in 4 weeks' time to reverse what Penny Wong has described as the worst foreign policy failure since the end of the Second World War?
Well, this is a massive foreign policy failure on the Prime Minister's watch. A massive foreign policy failure. One in which they were warned about, one in which even during the weeks leading up to the government finally sending Zed Saselja, a junior person, to the Solomons, we were saying, what are you doing to engage here? This isn't something that has just arisen. This is something that has been in the planning for a period of time, and quite clearly the relationships have broken down. And the United States, when I have participated in various forums, and as we know, historically, has relied upon Australia to be a key player in the Pacific as well. Australia has been the security partner of choice for the Pacific for a long period of time, for the entire post-World War II period. That's broken down. We need to repair it.
If I can just ask you on a draft for teachers, a guideline for teachers in the Northern Territory, it shows teachers being urged to organise non-gendered sports teams. Do you think this is a positive thing given the current context? Would you like to see that in other states, or do you think it raises some concerns?
Well, it's been dismissed, I note already, by the NT government, and it's not appropriate.
Mr. Albanese,
doubling the fines for thuggish unions and officials. What's your position on that? Think it's a good idea? Would you support it?
It's no surprise. First of all, what's been announced by the government today is not our policy, so just to give you that cleanly. But secondly, it is no surprise that the government has decided the biggest issue they want to deal with is to be able to have an attack on unions, and still to this day, they have not legislated to deal with wage theft. So if an employer is stealing from their workers, Mr Morrison doesn't think that's a concern. And we saw some extraordinary cases over the time that Mr Morrison's been Prime Minister. It's not just that they chose to not, or that they couldn't get round to it. They had wage theft legislation in the Parliament in front of them, written by themselves, and they, together with One Nation, voted it down. So the priorities of the government here are just completely wrong, and if they were serious about wanting to make sure we had law abiding at the workplace, the first thing to do is to make sure that people are paid properly.
Mr. Albanese, can I please just ask you, Mr. Albanese, can I please ask you, what is your view on transgender participation in women's sport?
That is covered by the Sex Discrimination Act.
But what's your personal view?
It's covered that girls should be able to play sport against girls and boys should be able to play sport against boys, and that should be covered. Well, it is covered by the Sex Discrimination Act, and that sports currently are in control of this issue. So let me tell you what this issue is really about. This is an issue about the chaos within the New South Wales branch of the Liberal Party. And I note that once again we see a leaked text message that's supposed to be a private text message from the New South Wales Premier to the Prime Minister. Once again, this Prime Minister, the Premier says that he didn't leak the text message. I don't know the source of that, but this is covered already by the Sex Discrimination Act.
Please get also Tony Burke and Jim Chalmers to respond to my question as well, if that's okay.
Well, they have the same position that I do.
Can they say that?
That's why I'm the leader.
Mr Albanese, you've said that Australia is in the naughty corner when it comes to climate change on an international stage. A key reason for that is the fact that the government wouldn't sign the UN pledge to end coal use. Would you sign that pledge, and if not, why not?
No.
Mr Albanese? Why not, Mr Albanese? Why not? Why not?
On the issue of boat turnbacks, Mr Albanese, you've made the point that you now support turning back the boats. How would you implement turning back the boats, and how many did you turn back last time you were in government?
Well, I know yesterday I got a misleading question from you with respect, Jono, because what you did was there was two separate questions and you conflated an answer. So I just... No, they were two separate questions. And you put to me that I gave one answer, but it was two answers to two questions, and I was perfectly accurate yesterday. Labor supports turning back boats where it's safe to do so. The same policy, exactly the same policy as the government.
Could I ask you,
how many did you turn back last time?
Workers in Queensland, WA and South Australia have voted in favour of industrial action. It's quite likely that strikes are going to take place in the next few weeks. Do you support these strikes, and if elected, will you fully implement all recommendations of the Royal Commission and fund them?
Well, I'll deal with the industrial then. I'll go back on the Royal Commission. What we are seeing is pressure having built up from people's wages having flatlined for 10 years. That's what we're seeing. And to view this in any other way, I think misses the point of what's happening in households. Every week as the pay comes through and the bills come through, it's becoming tighter and tighter, and it's been going like that for a decade. What we are seeing happening at workplaces has been two things. One, unions did the right thing during the pandemic and held back on industrial action. It was incredibly responsible, and it was done across the board. But secondly, what's happening now at a number of workplaces is that pressure that has building for a decade is people are saying we need to get wages moving, and Mr Morrison's response to that is to legislate a pay cut.
On the aged care issue, our 5-point plan is directly arising from the Aged Care Royal Commission. That is a nurse in every nursing home, 24/7. That is 215 minutes of care. That is increased wages for people in the aged care sector. That is better food and nutrition, and we've announced a specific plan with the Maggie Beer Foundation to deliver that. And the fifth and really important point is transparency and accountability. We want every dollar that goes into aged care to go into better care and better food and better outcomes for our older Australians. And with regard to the recommendations of the Royal Commission, my observation is this. Why does the government set up a Royal Commission and then ignore the central recommendations in it? The central recommendations of the Aged Care Royal Commission, in which aged care residents, aged care providers, family members, people made these submissions about the crisis in aged care, and what they got from this government was contempt. Nothing to assist workers in the sector. And you talk about the frustration that workers are feeling. Workers are leaving the sector. Think about this. All of you here today and the workers here today will have parents, will have uncles and aunties, will have other, if they're really young, they might have grandparents. But guess what? It might be us one day, and there won't be an aged care sector to look after them unless we do something about this, and unless we do something about it now.
Mr Albanese.
The title of the report is neglect.
Mr Albanese.
Neglect, in one word. In one word. And what we have is a neglect of a Royal Commission that has been titled neglect.
Mr Albanese.
Neglect from this government.
Mr Albanese.
We have made very clear what our plan is on aged care, and quite frankly, when I sat in the budget lockup with Jim and the team on the Tuesday night, because I did have a draft of the speech ready to go for Thursday, I was stunned when I asked, has anything at all happened on aged care? And this is a government that has $70 billion of additional spending with no offsets between my EFO in December and their March budget, but they couldn't find a single dollar. Aged care workers are despairing. This is tough work. It's physically demanding. They have faced with circumstances whereby they're in an aged care home and they have 3 buzzers going at once. Which person do they go and lift up? They have people who are living in their own soil, unable to be changed for days. You have 50%. 50%. The Royal Commission found this. This isn't Labor Party versus Liberal Party. This is the Royal Commission established by the government. Found that over 50% of aged care residents were not getting the nutrition that they need. They're literally starving. There is a crisis in this country, and that's what this election is about. This election is about whether we have a government that looks after people, or whether we have Scott Morrison who goes missing unless there's a photo op, unless there's a campaign. You'll see Scott Morrison doing photo ops every day. Good pictures, I've no doubt they'll deliver on that. But he doesn't deliver on his key responsibility. He always blames someone else. And the aged care crisis, of which a government member said to me, oh, but there aren't any votes in it. Well, I'll tell you what,
Mr Albanese.
this needs addressing, and I make no apologies for addressing it.
Mr Albanese, just back to...
Last week the High Court said that it was appropriate to fine the CFMEU the maximum amount because lower amounts of fines weren't changing industrial behaviour from that union. Can I put this question to you rather than Mr Burke just for a minute, please?
Yes,
Okay. What's your reaction to that ruling? Is now really the time to abolish the ABCC? Should we be worried about the CFMEU under a Labor government?
I do think we need to listen to what the courts have had to say with respect to the ABCC. And when the federal court said through Justice Kerr, I think it was, that the ABCC was treating its job as a blood sport, then I think we know we've got a regulator that's not doing its job. We've got a regulator that was set up to do a political job. We've got a regulator that has told Senate estimates that if it sees a safety poster or a poster in a workplace that is raising money for flood relief, if it also carries a union logo, it's an offence. They think those are the priorities. So we make no apology for saying that a regulator that is ridiculously politicised, that has been criticised by the courts as behaving as though it's a blood sport, should not be a regulator. Wherever you have a situation where there's aggression happening, wherever you have a situation where there's illegality happening, it should be the same rule across every workplace. The police should be called in. That's how you deal with illegal behaviour at every workplace, and we make no apology for that.
The maximum fine is appropriate in this case.
He's been very patient.
Mr Albanese, back to the Solomons. You referred to Zed Seselja as a junior minister. Would an Albanese government elevate the significance of the Pacific portfolio? And secondly, would you be prepared to make a personal visit to the Solomons if you're elected?
On the second, yes, I would. Yes, I would.
And the first?
Yes, I would. And in the first, we would have sent Penny Wong, quite frankly, and that would have been appropriate. Last one.
Why won't you sign, or why wouldn't an Albanese government sign the UN pledge to stop coal? Why wouldn't you sign that pledge?
Because coal is a part of our energy mix here in Australia right now. Coal is a part of our energy mix here.
What
would a Labor government have at hosting the COP conference, as you have said you will try and do, if you will not even commit to this UN pledge?
I think we would have a very good chance of hosting a COP conference. And our proposal, by the way, goes to, and I'll finish with this, our proposal goes to Australia and the Pacific hosting a COP conference. I've had the honour of going to two Conference of the Parties, the ones held in Montreal, where Kyoto came into effect with enough people ratifying the Kyoto Protocol. I also attended the COP in Nairobi, and I engaged in one of the things about the Conference of the Parties is that it isn't just a government-to-government engagement, although that of course is the main game. It's also one where business and civil society participate in processes as well. So I think our plan, very consciously, as part of our announcement that we made back in December of our climate plan, is about deeper engagement with the Pacific. If you go to Kiribati or Tuvalu or any of these Pacific Island nations, what you'll find is that if you ask them what is their priority, they will talk about climate change. So it is an opportunity for us, together with the Pacific, to embrace them. It's the sort of constructive relationship building that's been missing from this government. I'll make this point as well, that our climate policy is another example of the how. I speak a lot about the what, including on aged care and what this campaign's about. It's about a different approach to aged care. It's about cheaper childcare. It's about strengthening Medicare. It's about more secure work and lifting wages and cost of living issues that we see. But it's also about the how. And our climate change policy, we had more extensive negotiations and consultations with people from the Business Council of Australia, Australian Industry Group, National Farmers Federation, the ACCI and the ACTU and unions. They all have been very supportive of our policy. That's what's important. We can end the climate wars in this country. And what we've seen over the last 48 hours, frankly, is a thought bubble yesterday whereby it appears from Angus Taylor's own response, there was no actual modelling at all done. What he did was just say, oh, well, there'll be $78 billion of additional investment. $52 billion of that is private sector investment. Private sector investment that's hanging back because they need certainty. The problem for this government, and the reason why time's up for this government, is that they don't have a plan for the future. They don't have a plan to deal with the economic transformation that will be driven by the shift that is happening in the global economy to clean energy. That is something that is happening globally. This government just have scare campaigns. They just have nonsense and making up figures and making things up. And they think that's enough to skate through without a plan for the future. Well, we have a plan for the future whereby our response on climate change, including engagement with our Pacific neighbours, will lead to cheaper, cleaner energy. That will allow investment in advanced manufacturing. That will allow more things to be made here. That will fit in with our plan to train people for those jobs in TAFE and university.
This election, it's easy to get lost amongst the polls, policies and pledges. Now there's an easy way to find out how your views compare to the major parties. Go online to Vote Compass, answer a few quick questions. You may be surprised where you stand on the political spectrum. Go to abc.net.au/Australia Votes.
Tonight, Australia's greatest minds face up to their own mortality.
Death. Do you spend any time thinking about how or when you might die?
I think about how you go out as opposed to when you go out.
Shot by a jealous husband. Thanks to the technological breakthrough of the bio bed, we can now live to 150.
Is that for everyone though? Because that doesn't look like the kind of thing that Medicare covers.
Tomorrow tonight at 9 on ABC TV and ABC iView.
Liam, this is Andy, and he's the father of our child.
Welcome, the love of my life, but also now very old.
We've been neighbours for years.
And yet I barely know you.
Sometimes life just happens.
I'm having a baby!
It arrives.
We can't go on like this.
I know. And you just have to deal with it.
Go find yourself. I feel like a therapist. You make a terrible therapist.
There's a whole part of me you've never seen.
Life, Sunday, ABC TV and ABC iView. Mysterious, suspenseful, thrilling. New drama on ABC iView.
Who are you?
I'm a bad person who's trying to be good.
What you did dishonours all cops.
When a man is prey to his emotions, he is not his own master.
There's been a report of inappropriate behaviour.
This life, this is all we need. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone.
To stream the best drama for free, log in to ABC iView.
Spending to boost economic growth. Live performance. His family had never lost hope.
Contains the genetic material.
Today, COVID restrictions for household contacts in New South Wales and Victoria to be eased. Australia concerned details of China's Solomon Islands Security Pact remain under wraps.
The Australian government was warned that this was in the offing.
Western weapons flow into Ukraine in a desperate bid to stop Russian advances in the east. And a hot air balloon ends up in a courtyard in suburban Melbourne. Hello and welcome to Mornings on the ABC News Channel. I'm Joe O'Brien. I'll just explain what happened at the end of last hour for people who are watching then. We were carrying a media conference with the Labor leader Anthony Albanese. There was a miscommunication and he was cut off very abruptly at 2 minutes before the top of the hour in Eastern States. That he only continued for another couple of seconds anyway, but that was a bit of an error and we apologise about that. There was nothing further to that. There's nothing more to it than that. It was an error and there was only a couple more seconds of that media conference anyway, and we'll analyse that in detail in the coming half hour. Taking a quick look at the weather in the capital cities around the nation today. Brisbane and Sydney mostly sunny, Canberra partly cloudy, Melbourne a possible